Welcome everyone to the culmination of our Vittoria campaign. For those of you who've been watching, we've done the 5 scenarios that lead up to this culmination of the battle as Wellington tries to break the final French position on the ridge you can see here today. Hope you've enjoyed the other scenarios, and for those of you who've been watching, you know the French have got the slight edge here. They've held up some of the strength of Wellington's attacks. They've had one victorious scenario by the British, when Charlie commanded the British forces, but on the other 3 scenarios, 4 scenarios even, the French have either drawn or been marginal victors. So as a result of that, the British are short of some of their troops today. The Light Division was unable to secure victory at La Mandad and is carrying on fighting there and unable to deploy to support Wellington's main assault here. So for this assault, Wellington's ordered up the majority of his artillery to bombard and counter-battery the very strong French artillery positions they had along the ridge here in Vittoria. The French line runs down from the village of Cristiana in the north, which you can see there along that small ridge line, and then down to the south to the village of Escaval in the south here. The British advance is led by Picton with the 4th Division. Supporting him, we also have Wellington's reserve cavalry, not on table at the moment, but in addition to the forces you can see, he has 2 brigades of heavy cavalry, one of guards and one of dragoons, and a brigade of light cavalry. Opposing him, the French simply have 1 brigade of dragoons. Okay, well, I hope you enjoy the game, and we'll just do a quick flyby so we can show you the troops and the deployments. So we'll start here on the French left flank. We have a dragoon brigade by the French. These will all be campaign cavalry, and they're all small regiments. So 4 small regiments of dragoons. We have a brigade occupying this village, supported by 2 artillery batteries on this hill. 1 of the brigade to the left and 1 of the brigade to the right. We have the strong central French position here, a brigade of 4 battalions and a further artillery battery, supported by another regular brigade of 4 battalions. And in the rear, we have Joseph's Guard, 2 battalions of voltigeurs and 2 battalions of grenadiers. They are grenadier status infantry. And finally, the flank secured on this position to the right, another 3 French line battalions. Most of the French troops are of line quality, with the, as I say, the guards being of grenadier quality. And I think there are some light troops, these 2 battalions, for example. I think they're also grenadiers or veterans. I'll check those in a minute. Facing off against them, we have all the British troops. These are all of line quality initially, for those on the table. Small brigade of 2 battalions on the far right, supported by a foot artillery battery. Another 3 battalions of line in the right centre, again our supporting artillery battery. 4 battalions of Portuguese, all regular. And then finally on the far left flank, as I look at it from the French position, 3 more battalions of British. As I say, in reserve they have 3 brigades of cavalry as well, and another brigade of veteran British infantry. So 2 strong anchor points for the French position in terms of these 2 villages, and a very strong centre. And a lot of artillery at play this time. Let's see how that plays out, and whether the French can use their artillery once again to dominate the British attack. Alright, I hope you enjoy this. This will be quite a substantial game. There's a very substantial number of troops on the table. Allied victory conditions are simply to break 4 French brigades. And if the French avoid that, they achieve victory. Okay. Welcome to the Battle of Vittoria and the culmination of our Vittoria campaign. Hope you enjoy it. Cheers everyone, and we'll crack on with the pre-game moves and pre-game artillery, and then at the first turn. Okay, hi guys, here we are at the start of turn 5. So we've done the preliminary moves and imposed all the hesitancies and necessary orders on the Allies' force, and done the French firing to cause some casualties on them. So we're now really ready to get into the battle proper. It's meant to be a 22 turn game, so a very long game, but I'm sure we'll get to a result before that. But let's do a quick recap on where all this preliminary movement has got us to. We'll start on the French left-hand flank. And as you can see here, they've moved their dragoon brigade, 4 regiments of dragoons, up onto this hill. They're faced off by a brigade of horse guards. So although the British are outnumbered, they outdo the French in terms of quality. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays through. They came on with one of the reserve roles that the Wellington used to bring his forces up to strength before the main assault. Moving across here, these 3 British regular battalions are moving forward to start putting some pressure on the French village on the hill. The French have just moved their skirmisher screen out and tucked their reinforcing units a bit closer, so they will definitely provide support if there's an assault against that village. Here in the centre, for the Allies, the Portuguese have taken very heavy casualties from the French artillery as they're faced off by 2 French batteries. So they're taking quite a lot of casualties as they've moved forward. They had to use a forwards order because of the number of times they went unformed in the approach march as a result of all that artillery fire. But with that forwards order, they're now on the table, and to support them, we've got another Allied heavy cavalry brigade deployed to their rear of 2 units of dragoons. So this is the French artillery battery that's caused all the grief for the Portuguese. Then as we move across, we can see perhaps the main strength of the British attack here now. So we've got 3 British battalions that have moved forward against the French line, and they've got infantry assault orders off on that 1st brigade, as indeed did the brigade facing off against the village. They also have infantry assault orders in place. And Wellington gets several bonus activation dices, so he's rolling 11 dice for his ADCs compared to only 7 for the French. So this should mean that although the French have a decent numerical parity, Wellington is able to outmaneuver them. So anyway, Wellington has brought on his KGL brigade in support of their main attack in the centre. And then over on the right, the British brigade over here suffered heavily from hesitancy results, and indeed is hesitant this turn, unable to move forward. But there is a British light cavalry brigade with some horse artillery that's come on to potentially put some fire into the right-hand flank of the French position. Right, that's it at the end of turn 5. So we'll start the game proper with all the pre-moves done with turn 6, and I'll bring you the action from there. Okay, so the Allies only got 4 ADCs, and we've rolled for all their activations. Because we had so few, we put them on re-rolls of all of our frontline brigades. They all activated, and unfortunately most of the rest of the British brigades did, with the exception again of that small brigade on the right hand side, which is obviously finding the prospect of assaulting the village somewhat daunting. The French actually had more ADCs. They rolled 6 of their 7 dice, and they put artillery assault on both their batteries. So let's roll those live. They've got re-rolls, so for this brigade needs its re-roll. They go hesitant, they do not get artillery assault off. And then the battery in the centre again. Wow, that's tremendously unlucky. That's 2 failed dice rolls, so no artillery assault for the French, and a waste of their ADCs. We'll roll for the activation of the rest of the French brigades. Okay, so not great news for the French. So this brigade has gone hesitant. This brigade with its artillery was hesitant. This brigade with its artillery was hesitant, and the dragoons on the far left-hand flank were hesitant. So no less than 4 hesitant brigades for the French and 1 for the British. So this will be a test for initiative. The Allies get a +3 bonus, and they rolled an 11 anyway. So the Allies have initiative for turn 6. Let's see if anyone declares any charges. Okay, so rolling for the charge, we've got the Horse Guards and Life Guards here charging in against these French dragoons. The Horse Guards and the Life Guards are a pretty significant advantage here. They're veterans against only line status for the dragoons. They have, both sides have their generals attached, but the Life Guards are heavy cavalry. I'll have to check whether the dragoons are. I don't think they are. They're fighting campaign cavalry, because that's the status of the dragoons, and the brigade of dragoons is hesitant. All right, let's see how we do in the roll. Okay, so indeed it's a +4 roll for the Allies, but the French do get the benefit of a re-roll because of their supports. So we'll start with the... I'm going to get my horse guards and life guards muddled up. I think the life guards are in red. Let's see. Anyway. Okay, so the Allies roll an 8, and the French roll a 6. We'll take that reroll, which takes it onto an 8. So it's an 8 versus 8, but the Allies get a +4 modifier. So a +4 result will cause the guards to melee with the Lan and the dragoons to be unformed. Right, and let's do the second assault. Again, the French have got an 8, the Allies have got an 8. The French will try for a reroll. They stay at an 8. So again, that's +4. So same result for both combats, and the Allied cavalry will be fighting with the advantage as they go into the French. Okay, so movement's complete in turn 6, and the British have moved up to start threatening the village here, and the skirmishers will be exchanging fire. In the centre, the Portuguese have again moved forward, and they're approaching the French guns. Here in the centre, the main British assault is moving forward against the French lines here, and on the far right, the British horse artillery has deployed behind a screen of light dragoons to potentially open fire on this village and start applying some pressure on that in this turn. Alright, that's it for movement for the French. Everything's pretty much as it is, and it'll just be firing, so we'll open fire with the British batteries. Okay, first the British skirmishers will open fire against the French, and we'll do the French skirmishers at the same time, who will return fire. Alright, both cause 1 casualty on one another. And then we'll move on and we'll do some counter battery fire by this British battery against the French batteries on the hill. See how we do. There'll be a -2 modifier. That's a 4. That's no effect from that British battery. Alright, we'll now open fire with this British battery against this French line battalion here. Again, that will still be at long range. We roll a 10. That's pretty good, and we'll roll for the bounce through. A 6. So there is a bounce through casualty as well. Let me just check that. Okay, so it'll be a discipline test on this French battalion. They've taken 6 casualties now, so this will be at -1. They're on 11. They're fine. Right, we'll then do some exchanges of skirmisher fire down here. Again, 2 dice for the British. It'll actually be 3 for the French. British cause 1 casualty. We'll do the third shot for the French and 1 casualty. So both cause 1 casualty. And then this French screen will fire at the British battalion facing it. So it gets 3 dice. Yep, against that screen. And they cause 2 casualties there. Alright, we'll just mark those. Finally, this British artillery battery will open fire against the French lines here. It rolls an 8. That's pretty good. At long range will be 1 casualty. And let's see if there's any bounce through. There is. So 1 more casualty each against both of these French battalions. Okay, so these 2 batteries on the hill will open fire at the Portuguese. For the first, we get a 4, which will be nothing, and for the second battery, we get a 7, which will be something at effective range. I think that'll be 1 casualty. We'll just put that on. Okay, that's firing for turn 6 done, just some relatively minor exchange of casualties, and we move on to the action for the turn. So this will be the cavalry combat on the hill here, and let's see how we do. We'll start with the British Guard regiment on the right. Okay, so the French are going to really suffer in these combats. It's 7 dice for the Allies, 3 for the French. The French lose 2 for being small units and being unformed. The Allies get 1 for being 1 morale grade better. They get 2 for being heavy cavalry. They lose 1 themselves for being a smaller unit. They get 1 for a better morale grade, and they get 1 for Elan. So if I've dotted that out right, it's 7 dice to 3. Start with the unit on the right as we look here. Okay, well the French do pretty well. They cause 3 casualties and 3 to the Allies. So in that first combat, it's a draw, and cavalry versus cavalry on a draw, we get to fight on. So 3 casualties each, so that'll be no effect on the rolls, and we'll do the second round now. Again, the French do remarkably. 3 casualties for the dragoons, but they do lose this time, and the Allies cause 4. So that'll be a win by 1. So the dragoons will retreat, and the British take the ground. Actually, I've just been rechecking the rules and realised we'll get to a different result here. So on a draw, the Allies and the French get to decide whether to fight on, and the French can throw their supports in, which will give them another bunch of extra dice. So we will have to roll those supports for their part in the combat as well. Okay, so rolling for the supports, they get 4 dice because they're not unformed. That was after the combating unit falling back through them, so they are still formed at this point. Wow, and they cause 3 casualties. So actually the French, rather than losing this combat, win it by 2. And so the British will retreat and the French cavalry return to their own lines, which effectively is where they are at the moment. Okay, so that was a remarkable result for the French Dragoons. Let's see if their colleagues can perform as well. They should not be so lucky, and indeed they're not. The Allies only take 2 casualties, French only cause 1. So the French lose by more than 3. So they rout, and the British on this flank take the ground. That's more what we expected from the last one. Okay, let's move those units. Okay, so as this wasn't a charge result, you don't get a charge on or anything like that. And the British Guard have done well on that flank, and this will be a falter test on this whole French brigade, unfortunately, as the first unit of French Dragoons routed. It went through its colleagues, so they have become unformed and disappeared off the table edge. Whereas for the Guard, they only had a retreat result as a result of losing that combat. So that'll be a falter test at the beginning of this next turn. Right, that completes the turn. On with the next. Okay, so the results of the imbalanced ADCs really starting to have an impact now. So the French actually only had 2 successes, which they'll both allocate to this faltering brigade, and everything will just get straight activation rolls. And for the Allies, we have no less than 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, including a bonus dice for the double 6, 9 ADCs to allocate to the Allies. Okay, so Wellington will do his allocations. He's clearly got initiative. Let's see how he plays them out. Okay, so we've done our activations. All Allied brigades were active. They put pretty much rerolls onto all of the brigades down the line. The artillery battery in the far distance there has got artillery assault played onto it, and that's gone off successfully. For the French, despite having no ADCs, actually did better this time and only have 2 hesitant brigades in their front line, and their 2 ADCs are allocated down here to see how this brigade does. They roll a 1, they're going to take their re-roll. They roll a 1, the Dragoons are gone. The Allies have swept this flank. Okay, so movement's complete on turn 7. This French bastion on the left-hand end of their line is now threatened by this British brigade, which has moved up to within volley range. The French supports, which were behind the village, are now in square because the lifeguards have moved up and are now threatening them, and the other unit of guards has now reformed. In the centre, the Portuguese continue their relentless advance into the teeth of the French artillery battery. We'll see how they do this turn. In the centre, it looks like everything's getting ready for assaults here. The British lines are in play, and there'll be a lot of exchange of musketry this turn, and we'll see how the British and French do there. On the right flank, the recalcitrant British brigade has started moving forward, and the guns have been unmasked. So we'll now... sorry about that, that was the boys just fighting over lunch. Alright, so yeah, the guns are unmasked, and we'll see how things go as we move on to firing in turn 7. Allies to go first. Okay, let's start firing for turn 7. Firstly, we'll open fire with this British horse artillery battery, which deployed last turn. It's firing at effective range against the village down here. When you're firing at villages, I'm sure you guys know that you halve casualties if you're firing at a built-up area, and you also take 1 off for it being in cover. So the hard targets. So 5 goes down to a 4, halved, no effect from the artillery. Right, nothing from these guns or skirmishers. There's a British skirmish screen here. Let's fire that. 5, that is a casualty on this French skirmish screen. They got to 2. All right, moving along, we've got a British battalion here. They moved forward this turn, so it'll be an inferior volley, and they're going through the skirmishers, but the skirmishers don't prove an effective protection because they're too close to the infantry battalion. So I'll simply absorb the first casualty. Reroll a 5 on an inferior volley, which will be no effect. We similarly have then some British skirmishers here, firing against the French artillery crew in the centre. Reroll 1-5, so that's 1 casualty against the artillery crew. Okay, and then we've got 2 shots here from this British skirmish screen against the French skirmishers. They do nothing. We then move across further, and we have these Portuguese skirmishers firing against this battery. That's better. That's 2 casualties. All right, I'll just stop for a second and mark those here. On the French left flank, the various shots by the British battalions, the inferior volleys, and the shots by the British skirmishers didn't do anything against the village, nor did that British gun battery. We do have a British gun battery here, however, and it's going to open fire against the French again. These are more shots at long range. We roll an 8, that will be a casualty, and for bounce through, we get nothing. So that'll be 1 further casualty against this line battalion. Takes them up to 7, so they're certainly been whittled down by the artillery fire they've been facing. 7 actually is only no, it was an 8, wasn't it? Which is 1 casualty, so that was right. And then finally, we've got this British battery here, which will also fire at the village. That's better, that's a 10. That will cause something. So 10 minus 1 goes down to 9 at long range. No, that only causes 1 casualty in a discipline test. That becomes half a casualty, but they will have to take their discipline test. They're all double 12, they're absolutely fine. So pretty ineffective firing by the Allies this turn. We'll now do some return fire from the French. Okay, firing done by the various different skirmish screens. We'll now move on to the artillery batteries. So these two again will open up against the Portuguese that are threatening them. Starting off with the left-hand battalion battery, that's 8. I think this might be at short range. If it's at short range, that's 3 casualties in a discipline test, or if it's at medium range, it's only 2. I will just check that. Okay, it was indeed 3 casualties in a discipline test, so the skirmish screen took the first, but the other 2 fell onto the battalion. And the second battery does a 1, that's fatigue casualties. They've obviously been firing for too long, that takes them up to 3. Okay, let's do the the discipline test on this battalion here. Wow, it's taken 9 casualties, so this Portuguese battalion will have to take this at -2. They're all a 10, that goes down to an 8, they're still formed, and they still keep coming on. Alright, that's the main French artillery batteries on the left fired. Let's do this one in the centre. Again, close range, first one will be taken by the skirmish screen. Wow, that's pretty good. That's an 11 at close range, good time to get that off. That's 4 casualties and a discipline test. Skirmishers to take the first. Alright, this will be a discipline test at -1 for this British battalion. They roll an 8, at -1 that's a 7, they remain formed. So the attack formations are all still in good shape. That's it for turn 7, let's move on with turn 8. Okay, good turn, both sides had a reasonably similar number of ADCs. The French have put artillery assault again on their grand battery on this hill, and otherwise every brigade went active. The British took the opportunity to get infantry assault off on the KGL brigade, moving up in support, and indeed now on the Portuguese. So their 4 frontline attacking brigades all have infantry assault orders in place. But unfortunately, as a result of that, they had a shortage of ADCs. So the artillery battery and the light cavalry on the right are hesitant. That's not too much of a problem. They were going to fire, and they're at close range. And the attacking first line of battalions in front of these guns here also went hesitant. But their intention was probably to shoot before they charged in. So that's not too much of a problem for the plan. All right, let's see who's got initiative. For the first time, the French get a +2 to their roll. Okay, the British get a 10, even with the +2 adjustment. The British retain initiative. All right, let's see who charges in turn 8. Okay, so the only charge in this turn is this charge against this Portuguese line battalion by this French battalion that was in this defensive position in line. It's decided that they've got so many forces here in the centre, the French need to counterattack a bit, and this Portuguese brigade is reasonably weak. Although that battalion, unfortunately, is one of the less weak ones, I think because some colleagues fled back through it, so it's only got 1 casualty. So we'll do our defensive volley and see what that does. So rolling for the British, the Portuguese. They roll an 8 for a standard volley. That is 3 casualties on the charging French, which will have a serious impact on this charge. Okay, that takes them up to 4, so that'll be a -3 modifier to start with on the charge. Okay, so let's roll the result, and the Portuguese will get actually 2 rerolls, so this looks pretty foolhardy. So the French get an 8, the Portuguese get a 9. So the French halt at charge distance and let off a volley. They get 3 dice as a standard battalion, I think. Yep. And they don't cause any casualties. All right, that's it for charges. We'll get on with normal movement. Okay, so the British have opened fire down here. The fired superior volleys up against the garrison in the building, causing a casualty, and a superior volley against that French skirmish screen still down in the valley. Took a base off there. The skirmishers fired and did nothing. Will now fire the British battery at long range. They get a double 1. That's a fatigue casualty on them. We'll mark that up. We fired the skirmishers, the Portuguese skirmishers here, caused some casualties on the guns, including, unfortunately, the 4th casualty on this right-hand battery. So the artillery assault, which we allocated to both these batteries, only one of them will be able to fire that. Okay, we'll next fire this battery, again at long range, with bounce through against this attacking French battalion here. Double 1, that's another fatigue casualty. And the bounce through doesn't do anything. So fatigue casualties on both those British batteries. Then this battery will open fire at the town at long range. That's a 5, that'll do nothing. And then the horse artillery battery will open fire as well. 3, that'll do nothing. Terrible set of rolls for the British, and fatigue casualties on almost all their batteries. Okay, so once again we fire this battery against the advancing Portuguese. These are at close range, going through the skirmisher screen first, but they will get artillery dice and bounce through. They roll a 10. That's pretty good at close range. That's 4 casualties in a discipline test, plus 2 bonus casualties. And a bounce through. I don't think you can get much better. That's our first casualty of the game. That Portuguese battalion is destroyed. We'll now fire our second battery, no longer with artillery assault because of the casualties it's taken, and it'll go against that second battalion that was in that assault. Again, a 10. I think this is at effective range. I will just take that, but a 10 is 3 more casualties and a discipline test on that battalion. It was indeed at effective range, so this French position again is proving very effective with their artillery. Let's see how they do in the centre here. So they're going to blast away here, close range through the skirmishers. Another great roll, a 9 at close range is 3 casualties and a discipline test. That will take that British battalion up to 8 casualties, so it'll be a discipline test at -2. 8, so they go unformed. Okay, that's it for turn 8, and we will have a Falter test on the Portuguese as they've taken that loss of that battalion to the artillery fire. Otherwise things stay intense in the centre, with troops perhaps struggling to deploy. Let's roll for ADCs in turn 9. Okay, so we've rolled for ADCs and allocated those. The British went for all rerolls trying to get the initiative this turn, and every British brigade is active. The French only had 4 ADCs. They allocated them again for rerolls. No, actually they went for artillery assault to protect this battery in the centre. That failed to come off despite a reroll, and the French now have 2 hesitant brigades. But we still have the Falter test to do with a reroll on the Portuguese. We get a 1, and we get a 1. That's 2 unlucky brigades in this game so far, so they have to savoir-qui-peur, and the Portuguese will fall back. Okay, so the game looks a bit more fragmented now. There's a huge hole in the centre where those Portuguese have fallen back, and we can redeploy this French artillery battery onto new targets. Still close contest in the centre, and standoff on the villages. Neither sides or on neither flank are the British rushing to press home, having learned how hard it is to assault the villages with good supports. All right, let's see how we do. The British do have initiative in turn 9. Charges to declare. Okay, so 2 charges declared by the British this turn. So their heavy dragoons already had a redeploy order to come through the gap around the flank of the Portuguese into the centre. And actually with the Portuguese fleeing, they didn't even need to redeploy. So they were able to declare a charge. They were in range, and they've crashed towards this French battalion. It is for more than 9 inches, so they will have a chance to form a square if they choose, which they almost certainly will, being in line and actually out of support range, unfortunately, from this artillery battery, so no defensive fire from them. And across to the right here, This British leading brigade has now charged this French line, so we'll see how they do. The guns won't be able to fire in support because they do have an enemy directly to their front in engagement range. All right, let's see how we do in these charges. Okay, so we have to take a standard discipline test for this. We're a line battalion, and when you're moving from line to square when you're charged, it's a test at -1. We've also got casualties of 4, so that's an extra -1. So this will be a leadership test at -2. They roll an 8, that goes to a 6, so they go unformed and don't complete the formation change. This is not looking good. Okay, unfortunately for the French, this is a +6 attack, a test for the British cavalry. Because they are unformed, they're caught in line, they've got 4 casualties already, and they're being charged by heavy cavalry. Both sides were attaching the commander, although in retrospect for the French that may not have been such a good idea. Wow, double 6, that's great. So they've won by more than 6. So cavalry versus infantry is going to be bad news. Victory, they ride down that whole battalion and they get to charge on. Let's measure the charge on range. Okay, so we rolled a 14 for their charge on distance, so they get as far as their command stand here, so not quite into this potentially 4th unit of French, but we will go through the unit we've wiped out into the battalion supporting them, and then through the skirmish screen. I should have re-rolled support dice for the French, which I could have done. I can't remember what they got, but with a +6 modifier and rolling a double 6 for the British, it wasn't going to make any difference anyway. So apologies for not doing the re-roll. I probably thought about it and just discarded it in the moment. All right, let's move those into the next charge. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is a risk to general test for our commander who was attached. Double 1, that kills him. That will be a falter test for this brigade. That's not great. All right, and then we do the charge into this infantry battalion here. This one is at -5 to the French. They have a slight advantage for being unformed, but they've also got significant casualties. Okay, so the French get a 5. The British got a double 1, but we'll use the reroll, a 3. Okay, so not such a great result. So 3 + 6 + 5 is 8. So they've won by 3. So they will melee with... no, they won't melee with Elan. Yep, they melee with Elan, and the French melee unformed. With that fairly dramatic intervention on the left of the centre of the French position, let's see how they do here. That's a defensive volley by the French. That's not looking great, that's a 3, so they simply lose fire discipline. Now let's roll the charge results as the British, and I think it's the Royal Scots charge in. So this one's potentially much closer, so it's a straight roll-off. The French get a +1 because of the casualties on the Royal Scots, but the French brigade is hesitant, so they lose 1 for that. So let's see how we do. Both get a support. All right, so both will re-roll their lower dice for their supports. Okay, so the French win. The French get a 9, the British get a 6. They lose by 3. Infantry versus infantry, so the British retire and take 1 casualty. Okay, so quite a lot's gone on in the move phase in turn 9, but not on the left flank. So you can see that the British Guards cavalry is starting to reform itself now. It's off hesitant orders and getting ready for posing more of a threat on this left flank, but that 2nd battalion is really just a support, or 2nd regiment is really just a support. Down here, this British brigade remains in standoff, looking to use its firepower to whittle down the French garrison, who've only so far taken 1 casualty, so that's not really going too far. You can see there's even more of a gap in the centre. I neglected to allocate any ADCs to the Portuguese brigade and used all of the others for re-rolls on my other units. I basically forgot that the Portuguese were still faltering, so they just went off the board. They carried on savoir-qui purring. I rolled 1 dice for them. They had no re-roll, and actually I think if they have no ADCs, they would have just continued to flee. So the Portuguese have gone. In the centre, there's been quite a radical change in the French formations. This brigade here, which will have a falter test at the start of next turn, has formed square in anticipation of losing its colleague and having some support. Over here, the French heavy artillery battery, which was there, has done a voluntary retire on the worry that it would get charged in the flank by the British cavalry and get wiped out next turn. So it's fallen back effectively, using the advantage of those squares to give it some protection here. Not sure where we'll redeploy it to, but better than losing it in the centre. Quite a lot of activity for the British here. So the retire result caused the attacking British battalion to fall back through its colleague, unforming them both, and the retire result pushed them back through the KGL brigade, but the KGLs were more than 6 inches behind them, so no disruption to the KGL brigade, and they fell back to this position here, and we took the opportunity of falling our 3rd battalion back to keep it as a brigade group. They were, and the British went first, they were just standing in front of the French guns. So if the French guns had not decided to flee, they were going to take a hammering this term, and being unformed, they wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. So they did a voluntary withdrawal, which you can do if you are unformed. So that brigade has basically rotated in place, and we have a fresh KGL brigade here, now ready to take up the attack in the centre. Let's see how they do. And over on the right-hand side, the British infantry regiments are moving up to start engaging this village bastion on the French right, and the horse artillery have prolonged their battery forward, so it's now within 12 inches, so within short range of garrison. We'll see where the garrison fire, but they'll probably have to go for the infantry as they're the closer target and the more immediate threat. We'll see when we get to the firing phase. So that's a very extensive movement phase, now complete. We'll now move on with firing, starting with the Allies. I think the Allies are increasingly convinced they're going to have to assault this village. They fired again for another whole turn with the skirmishers and the infantry battalions, and they simply caused 1 casualty to the French skirmisher stands and took 1 casualty in return. So the halving of shots by the built-up area really does negate the effect of all of that firepower going against it. So we fired the artillery, that didn't do anything as well. Alright, so we'll fire this British artillery battery at long range against this French square. Let's see what we do. We do an 8. Okay, we're going to get some benefits, I think, for firing against a square, but we'll see what happens at long range. Yeah, when you're firing at a square, whatever range, you get +2 combat dice. So we've got an 8, and then for our combat dice, we've rolled another casualty. So 8 at long range is 1 casualty. That takes it up to 2 on this French square. Okay, the KGL now, they moved forward, so they'll open up with an inferior volley against the French. Wow, we do pretty well. We roll an 11. That's a good time for the KGL to roll that. So an inferior volley, an 11 is 3 casualties and a discipline test. That battalion has already taken 3 casualties, so this will be a 4 at -1 is down to a 3. They retreat. Not good timing for the French. Okay, so the final bits of firing will be against this village on the right, starting with the infantry battalion doing an inferior volley. That'll be nothing. All right, the British artillery battery in the distance over here will fire at long range. 3, that does nothing. In fact, it does a fatigue casualty. And this one at -2, 7 goes down to a 5. That will be nothing as well. So no effects from all of that fire against the village. The defensive fire from the village just simply put 1 casualty on the British frontmost battalion. All right, I'll just mark up that fatigue casualty, and then we'll do the French artillery, and then I think we're fired for the turn. Unfortunately for the British, I think the supporting battery, which supporting cavalry regiment, is in close range fire for both of these French batteries. Certainly one of them has got it in arc, and I think the second one does too. So 2 close range shots. That's a pretty good start for the British. That's only a 3, that won't be anything, and a 5. Wow, they've got away really lightly with that. So a 5 simply does 1 casualty against the British. A remarkable escape for the British Dragoons. That's it. That's the end of firing for turn 9. And then we'll simply have this hand-to-hand combat to do. Back in a second. Okay, let's see if the French can hang on like their Dragoon colleagues did. They only get 3 dice. The charging British heavy Dragoons get 8. Well, the French cause no casualties, and the British cause 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A resounding feat for the British, and actually, irrespective of the result, whether it's a rout or not, that French battalion is destroyed. Okay, so we've rolled for all brigades, and every single brigade on both sides is active. We got infantry assault off on the British brigade that's threatening this village here, but yet not enough casualties on the village, I don't think, to try that at the moment. We'll continue with the assault in the centre. We have Fulter tests now against this French brigade. They roll a 2, they'll need their reroll. They roll a 3, that's a retire result, and that brigade, and indeed their attached artillery battery, is gone. So on a retire result, retreating and all returning Marine units retire, which is an 18-inch move, which will take all of those battalions off the table. There's a big hole in Joseph's centre. Okay, so now quite an important roll-off for initiative. See how the Allies and the French do. I think for the first turn in the game, with no penalties applying, the French get an 8, the Allies get a 6. The French get initiative. They get to decide whether to charge and move first. Oh my gosh, there's a huge hole in the centre. What's gone on? Well, this is what's gone on. The British cavalry had the option of charging Joseph's Guard reserve here in its reserve position on the baseline. They're all formed columns, and they're a tough thing for chargers to break, especially if they're not elite cavalry, and these ones aren't. They're only heavy cavalry. So they wheeled slightly. You can wheel your bonus charge move, which is up to 6. So they wheeled 3 inches of that and then added the remaining 3 to their charge distance, moved 18. So that gives them a pretty substantial move, and they moved across from smashing the French battalions here to hitting these 2 new French battalions in the flank. This looks really bad news for them. They might have opportunity to form square. I'll see what happens on a flank charge, but both of them pretty much have to make that test. Otherwise, they're going to be in the fleeing for their lives into the village from these attacking British heavy cavalry. All right, that's the British charges for this turn. Let's see about forming a square. Okay, so the front battalion has to test at -3, the rear one at -5. The front one fails, and the rear one also fails. Both fail to form square. The cavalry will charge in. Let's see what happens. Okay, charging into the French battalion. It's the front one first. It's at +5 for the French, for the British rather. Yep, there's a re-roll at -1 for the French. They still get a 7. The Allies with a +5 get a 14. They've won by 7. They destroy the unit and they charge on. Let's see how far they charge on. 15 inches, right. We'll do the first bit of that charge on move. Okay, and the second charge result is at +7. So again, pretty much a foregone conclusion, but you never know. The French do get support, so we will not re-roll. The British will re-roll one of theirs. They get a 5 plus a 7 is... Yeah, see, this isn't a foregone conclusion. A 5 plus a 7 is a 12, plays a 9. So they win by a substantial amount. They win by 3. Charge results win by 3. Cavalry versus infantry. Cavalry will melee with Elan, so they will, I'm sure, churn through that unit, but they will get to charge no further this turn. All right, that's it for charges. Now we move on with normal movement for the Allies. Okay, movement's finished in turn 10. The British cavalry have now reformed on this hill. The British charged, actually. I didn't do it at the right phase, but we did it at the end of the charge phase. Those French skirmishers, just to drive them off because they were being annoying. So the right-hand British battalion here just drove them off, so we can have uninhibited fire next turn. This French battery remains on the hill, and the battery that was in the centre is now redeploying to take up position on its right flank, potentially. Down in the centre, we've got the British heavy cavalry about to go into the flank of that French unit, and the KGL brigade is now deploying to continue to crush the French centre. Joseph's Guard is now starting to move up, hopefully filling the gap when, if this brigade on the right can hold the centre of his position. In the rear, this British brigade has reformed and will be able to re-advance next turn, and this brigade remains stationary. All right, we'll do the firing. Not a lot, I don't think. Most of it will be against buildings, So I'll do the firing and let you know what the results are. Again, this looks like a overwhelming attack by this British heavy cavalry. The French battalion's already taken 8 casualties from artillery fire earlier in the game, and now is being hit in the flank. So I've probably got this wrong, but it's at least 8 casualties against 2. That's 1, 2, 3, 4. That battalion is destroyed. 1 more casualty on the British. Okay, so some important roles on the right flank. Over here, the British artillery has gone hesitant. All other brigades are active, so both for the Allies and the French. Let's see what our falter test is on this brigade down here. 3 is a retard. Whoa, that one's gone on the floor. And 3 is a retard. That's another French brigade gone. That's 3 French brigades broken. And Wellington is well on his way to victory. Okay, so I think we're on turn 11, possibly turn 10. Certainly not nowhere near turn 22, and it looks like we're reaching the denouement to the battle. We have a small French brigade holed up in this village, besieged by a British foot battery and 3 battalions of line troops, and pinned by the horse guards to their left flank. So they're unable to contribute much to the battle. In the centre, it's a bit of a Hail Mary for the French. Joseph's personally leading his guard forward against this line of KGL. We'll see how that charge goes. Meanwhile, the glory ride of the British Heavy Dragoons continues. Having smashed 2 brigades, they are now trying to smash this 3rd brigade. We'll see if that battalion can again attempt to form square before it's hit by the cavalry. All right, let's do the charges as we start turn 11. First, we'll get a defensive volley for the KGL. We roll an 8. This is a superior volley, so that'll be quite good. That's 3 casualties and a discipline test against the guard, which unfortunately takes that particular battalion up to 4 casualties. Should be a negative modifier in the charge. Let's see how they do. They count as grenadiers. They roll a 7, so despite the -1 with their grenadier bonus on discipline tests, they survive that and can continue the charge. Let's see what the charge results are. Okay, so due to the number of casualties caused, this is a +5 test for the KGL. They roll a 7, the French roll a 7. The French will try a reroll with one of their supporting battalions, and then they'll try a reroll with their 2nd supporting battalion. They get a 10. The British will use their KGL light for a reroll. Not so good. They get a 6, but on a +5 that becomes an 11. So the charge result is -1. The attacker stops to loose a volley. That's just simply with 1 dice, which they do. Cause a casualty, but they grind to a halt in front of the KGL. Okay, so for this charge, the French actually have a much better chance of passing the discipline test because they are both formed and not in a line. They're simply flanked. Let's test at -1. They roll a 12. They're fine. Right, now let's move on. They have managed to form a square. Okay, so this is simply a -1 test for the British. They do get a reroll. The British roll a 9, the French roll a 9. This will not be enough. Even with a reroll of 12, and it's not a natural 12, so there's no destiny test. They've only won by 2, and against a square, both sides lose a casualty, and the cavalry retires. Then as a final element of the charge, this British brigade on the right flank has decided to charge in, as this unit can no longer support the assault into the village, I don't believe, as it's been forced into square, and this unit went unformed from the far last turn, so possibly the best opportunity to get in. So that's the last charge, but that will go straight onto hand-to-hand combat. We do need to do the defensive fire. That's pretty good, because 2 casualties on the attacking British, but that will then get resolved in the hand-to-hand phase. All right, now on with normal firing, and the British to fire first. Okay, so firing, no major effect. We caused another casualty on the garrison here, but they're still in very strong position with their 2 spare battalions available to reinforce. The guns exchanging effective long-range artillery fire. The British artillery over here, this battalion of foot artillery, opened fire at the flank of Joseph's guard, caused a casualty. The 2 KGL battalions swung round and let off inferior volleys, but managed to cause casualties against these 2 supporting battalions, and unformed indeed one of Joseph's guard. So I don't think they're going to survive long against these KGL. And in the centre, all we have to do is see how this charge goes in. Let's see whether we can capture this village. Okay, so in this first round of assault we have a small advantage to the British, as they're veterans. Oh no, they're not veterans actually, so lose a dice, they're not veterans. So it's a straight roll off, 4 against 4, the British assaulting a British built up area, but the French are informed. Alright, the British win by 1. We get the option of going on to a second round of combat. If they don't, the French will be forced out and forced to retreat, which will take them off table, which won't be great for this brigade. So we will fight the second round. The French will attempt to hang on to the village. Okay, so another close roll for this one. Basically the same number of dice. I think the British have an advantage of 1. If I can get all the dice into my hand, I'll roll part of them and then the rest. Alright, looks good for the British. So they've got 2, 4, 5, 6, 7 casualties, although the French haven't done too bad. They've caused 5, so the British win by 2. Now the question is, can the French use this battalion as well? Now technically, according to the rules, they can. However, this unit have already been forced into square and effectively have had a charge, a go in a charge combat. So it doesn't feel right to me. They can effectively be engaged in combat twice as a result of 2 different charges and act as a support in a second one when they've already been engaged in the first one. So let me know if I'm wrong in the rules. I think technically by the rules they can fight, but that just doesn't feel right to me. They've been in charge, they've formed square, so they've performed their full actions for this turn. So unfortunately for the French, that means they lose this combat and are thrown out of the village, and their units retreat. Alright, there you go, that's it. This is a resounding victory for Wellington. He has absolutely hammered the French. The French surrendering this village on the right flank means their link to La Hermandad is broken, and the British have broken through here. This brigade is a broken brigade, so the 2 that were thrown out of the village were both on retreat results. Although they did survive and they didn't dissolve, they retreated off table and can't come back if you're on retreat orders, or that's the way I play it, if you're off table. And with only 1 battalion left, that brigade is broken. That is the 4th broken French brigade, alongside the one that was positioned here, that has been driven off by the cavalry attack, the 2nd brigade that was here, and the dragoons that were destroyed earlier in the game. So all the French have is their garrison here on the left flank, which still looks in really good shape and can pull back off the table intact. And here in the centre, you had the vain counterattack by Joseph's Guard. These units have all started to take casualties, not heavy ones yet, just 2 or 3 each, but faced by those superior volleys of the KGL, backed up by the cavalry, another brigade in the rear, 2 artillery batteries that are able to put fire into them. I think they will simply have to sell themselves dearly to allow Joseph and all his gold to escape. And the British, as happened in the actual Battle of Victoria, have smashed the French lines. The French army is now disintegrating, although it won't be completely destroyed, because the lads are going to get stuck into that baggage train and loot all of the gold that Joseph was hauling back to France from Madrid. All right, here you go. We'll do a final look at the table at the end. But I hope you enjoyed this. This is a culmination in our Vittoria campaign, and I think it was a tremendous battle to close it with. And it's always great to see heavy cavalry in action, and that repeated charges by the dragoons ripping through the French flank, if you're a British player, was a great thing to see. All right, let me know what you think. Let me know whether you've enjoyed the campaign, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Cheers, everyone. Remember, please subscribe, recommend the channel to your friends, and I'd love to hear any comments.